Imagine a tightrope stretched across a canyon at dawn. The rope is thin, almost invisible against the pale sky, and the walker steps out anyway. Not with confidence carved from stone, but with knees that tremble, arms that windmill, breath that catches. Here's the paradox. The wobble is not a flaw in the crossing. The wobble is the crossing. Without it, there is no movement, no learning of balance, no discovery of where the body ends and the world begins. We think we are supposed to glide. Life keeps teaching us to sway. Most of us grow up with a quieter picture, a straight road, clean lines, progress that looks like a staircase, each step higher than the last. And so when we fall, when the rope lashes beneath our feet, when the staircase crumbles into a slide, we whisper to ourselves, "This is wrong. I'm wrong." But what if the fall is not the opposite of forward? What if it is forward, wearing a different mask? Let me tell you a small story. A child stands near a table, gripping its edge with both hands. Their legs are unsure, the floor a foreign continent. They let go and try to walk, to steps. Then the inevitable, the body tilts, gravity claims its due, and the child drops onto their diaper with a shocked little gasp. You don't conclude, watching this, that the child has failed. You don't take them aside and say, "Maybe walking isn't for you." You smile, you clap, because in your bones you understand something the child also knows without words. Falling is part of the apprenticeship to life. The fall is not evidence of incapacity. It is evidence of attempt. Somewhere along the way we forget this mercy. We begin to treat the ground like a courtroom. Each stumble becomes a verdict. Each wrong turn an identity. We stop saying, "That didn't work," and start saying, "I don't work." But failure, in its raw and honest form, is just information. It is reality tapping on your shoulder saying, "Not that way. Try again. Try differently." It doesn't condemn. It corrects. It redirects. It roughens your hands so you can hold what matters. Think of every skill you secretly admire. The musician whose fingers seem to pour water from the piano. The athlete who turns air into a playground. The friend who speaks truth with calm precision. Behind each of them is a graveyard of wrong notes, missed shots, awkward conversations, drafts thrown away. We only see the dance. We do not see the bruises that taught rhythm. So before we go further, let's loosen the old definition. Failure is not a wall at the end of the road. It is a bend, a teacher in rough clothing, a kind of wind that pushes at your back, not to knock you out of life, but to nudge you deeper into it. And if that is true, then the question changes. Not how do I avoid failing, but how do I learn to fall without fearing the ground? If you listen closely to the world around you, you can hear a strange hymn playing almost everywhere. It says, be impeccable, be efficient, be trending, be right the first time. It's in the polished resumes, the filtered photos, the way we rehearse our opinions before we speak them. Even our behind the scenes are curated now. We perform effort like theater, so no one sees the sweat as sweat. And beneath that hymn, another message hums like bass. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't waste time. Don't be the one who falls. But life has never been a museum of perfection. Life is a workshop. It smells like sawdust and burnt bread. It is a place where the hands learn by doing, and doing is messy. Yet modern culture sells us a myth of the perfect path, a myth that suggests there is one correct route through love, career, art, identity, one highway lit by neon signs, and if you miss the exit, you're lost for good. The myth is seductive because it promises safety, certainty, control. Look at how we measure ourselves: grades, metrics, followers, milestones by age. Success stories with dramatic music and clean arcs. These are not evil tools. They help us orient. But when we mistake the map for the land, something goes numb in us. We start living like we're trying to pass a test that never ends. We attempt only what we believe will be applauded. We aim for outcomes, not for ALIVENESS. And here's the quiet cost. Avoiding failure is also avoiding growth. The safest life is often the smallest life. If you only walk where you already know the ground, you never discover the edges of your own horizon. The fear of failing doesn't just keep you from losing, it keeps you from playing. And a human being who stops playing begins to shrink, like a muscle left unused. Have you noticed how certainty can become a cage? when we cling to being right, we stop listening. When we cling to appearing capable, we stop learning. We polish our known selves until they shine like armor. But armor, however beautiful, cannot feel the wind. It cannot hug. It cannot swim. The myth of the perfect path is a myth of untouchability. It asks you to be a statue instead of a river. Let's be honest, the perfect path doesn't exist because you don't exist as a finished product. You are not a sculpture destined to be unveiled at some final moment. You are more like a story that keeps revising itself. The draft is the point. The eraser marks are holy. Even the dead ends belong to the journey. They are the places where you learn what you're not. So perhaps the real rebellion, in a world addicted to polish, is to be willing to be a beginner, to be seen mid-process, to let your life look like a life, not a brochure. And once you allow that, failure stops being a scandal. It becomes what it always was, part of the human rhythm, like inhale and exhale, like winter and spring. And yet, even if we understand this with our minds, there's a figure inside us who doesn't care about philosophy. You know this one, the inner judge, the silent accountant of mistakes, the voice that appears the moment something goes wrong and says, "See, that proves it. You are not enough. You never were." Where does this judge sit? Often in the chest, sometimes in the throat. It tightens when you hit send on a risky email, when you step onto a stage, when you confess love, when you apply for the job you want but don't feel ready for. The judge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a wince, a retreat, a subtle delay, and we call that delay being practical. But it is usually fear wearing a sensible coat. We are afraid not only of failing, but of what failure seems to mean, that it will expose us, that others will see our seams, that we will be exiled from belonging. Underneath the fear of falling is the fear of being unlovable while we are on the ground. So let's look directly at this. When you fail, what do you imagine happens? Do you imagine laughter, abandonment, a permanent stain? The mind is a natural dramatist. It takes one moment and writes a whole future from it. But most of that future is fiction. People are rarely thinking about you as much as you fear. And even when they do notice your stumble, what they're often seeing is something tender, another human risking life. Think of the people you trust most. Are they the ones who never fail, or are they the ones who have failed and are still here, alive and honest? The friend who rebuilt after heartbreak, the colleague who owned a mistake and grew, the elder whose laughter carries the memory of hard years. Their authority doesn't come from being spotless. It comes from being real, from having met the edge and returned with softer eyes. Failure is a mirror, not a cruel one, an honest one. It shows you where you are attached to an outcome, where you are trying to control the uncontrollable, where your ego has mistaken performance for worth. If success tends to inflate our stories about ourselves, failure edits them. It brings you back to what's essential. It asks, do you want to be praised, or do you want to be free? And sometimes, in the rubble of a plan, you find the bone deep truth of your desire. You find what you care about enough to try again. Failure can hurt, yes. It can bruise pride, disrupt timelines, drain savings, end relationships. Let's not romanticize it. But pain is not the same thing as poison. A surgeon cuts to heal. A storm uproots to make room. The pain of failure is often the pain of becoming someone who can hold more life. So when the inner judge arrives, meet it like a tired guard at the gate. Thank it for trying to keep you safe, and then walk past it anyway. Because your life is not a trial you must win. It is a pilgrimage you must live. There's a certain kind of magic that only appears to those who are willing to repeat themselves. Not the repetition of boredom, but the repetition of devotion. The potter centers a lump of clay on the wheel, and the first bowl collapses. The second one too. The third holds for a moment, then buckles like a tired knee. If you walked into the studio only at the end, you'd think the potter was gifted, maybe even blessed. But if you sit there for a season, you see the truth. Skill is simply failure that has been listened to long enough to become form. Practice is where failure stops being a threat and starts being a language. Every wrong note is the piano saying, your finger landed here, not there. Every missed shot is the body explaining timing. Every sentence you delete is your mind learning its own shape. In practice, failure is not personal, it is procedural. It is a compass that points away from illusion and toward what actually works. Consider again the child learning to walk. What makes that child brave? They do not believe in themselves in the way motivational posters demand. They are brave because they are curious, because the world is calling, because the desire to reach the lamp or the parent's arms is greater than the momentary shock of falling. Curiosity is one of the purest antidotes to fear. It turns failure into experiment that we lose this curiosity when we start performing life. Instead of exploring it, we want results before we want intimacy with the process. But life doesn't give its treasures to people who rush it like a vending machine. It gives them to people who court it, to people who understand that becoming is slow, like dawn. Look at the seasons. Winter is not a failed summer. It is the part where roots go deeper, where the tree conserves, where the field rests in order to return. If you judge the oak in January for not blooming, you would be using the wrong calendar. In the same way, many of your so-called failures are just out-of-season growth. The seed underground doesn't look like success. It looks like nothing. Yet everything is happening. This is why the great crafts art, love, courage, wisdom are born in the tolerance of awkward stages. You cannot skip the phase where you are clumsy. You cannot be a fluent speaker without first being a stammerer. You cannot be a steady lover without first being a frightened one. The soul learns and drafts. So when you fail, ask a different question. Not what's wrong with me, but what is this teaching me? Not how do I make this never happen again, but how do I meet this more skillfully next time? You'll notice how the body relaxes when the question softens. You create space for learning instead of sentencing. And slowly, almost secretly, failure becomes alchemy. The raw ore of wrong turns into gold, into discernment, humility, endurance, and a quiet, unshakable confidence that doesn't come from never falling, but from knowing you can rise. There comes a moment, usually after you've tried hard enough to care and failed hard enough to feel it, when you realize that the real terror was never the event itself. The real terror was the illusion you were clutching, the illusion that you could control how life unfolds, that if you were careful, smart, good, lovable, you could choreograph the world into a predictable dance. But life is not a machine that rewards correct inputs. It is a wild, breathing thing, a river with weather, a partner with moods, a forest that grows in the direction of light, not in the direction of your plans. The more you try to hold it still, the more it slips through your fingers, and failure is often the moment your tight grip meets reality's refusal. This is why failure is so intimately tied to love anything, someone, a craft. A calling is to enter a realm where outcomes are not guaranteed. You can do everything right and still lose what you cherish. You can speak tenderly and still be misunderstood. You can plant carefully and still face drought. Love makes you vulnerable not because you are naive, but because love is participation in the living world, and the living world is not under contract. So what do we do with that vulnerability? Many of us respond by narrowing. We hedge. We keep one foot on the shore. We say, I'll try, but not too much, as though half-heartedness could protect us from pain. Yet half-heartedness is its own slow ache. You feel it as a dullness, a drifting, a sense that your life is happening at arm's length. Safety can become a kind of starvation. Failure invites a different posture, surrender, not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of giving in to the truth that you are not the sole author here. You are a co-author, a dancer, not the stage. When you stop insisting on a fixed script, you can hear the music that is actually playing. Think of how a skilled dancer moves. They don't brute force every step. They listen to rhythm. They adjust. They allow gravity to be part of the dance, rather than an enemy of it. In the same way, failure teaches you to move with life instead of against it. It teaches you to be responsive rather than rigid, to be here, now, rather than trapped in a fantasy of how things should be. Even time looks different through this lens. We fear failing partly because we think it wastes time. But what is time for, if not for becoming? The years you spent trying and missing were not empty years. They were the forge, the compost, the quiet shaping of a person who can hold more truth without breaking. And here is the strange gift. When you befriend the possibility of failure, you loosen into joy, not because you love pain, but because you are no longer bargaining with life, you are living it. You are dancing in the open air where anything can happen. Loss, yes, but also surprise, grace, and the kind of growth that only comes when you risk being changed. So let's gather the threads, not into a tidy moral, but into a way of walking. You are going to fail. Some of your failures will be small and almost cute burnt dinners, awkward jokes, projects that fizzle. Some will feel like a door slamming in your chest, a relationship that ends, a dream that doesn't materialize, a version of yourself you outgrow only after it breaks. This is not pessimism. It is membership in being alive. The question is not whether you will fail, but whether you will make failure an exile or a homecoming, whether you will let it harden you into caution or soften you into wisdom. The difference is not in the event, it's in the relationship. Imagine carrying a lantern through a dark field. Each time you stumble, the lantern swings, casting light. On different parts of the ground, you see a route you didn't notice, a hole you might avoid next time, a path you didn't realize existed. Failure is that lantern. It doesn't erase the darkness. It makes you more capable of moving within it. And perhaps the deepest realization is this: you were never meant to earn your worth by performing flawlessly. Your worth is not a wage. It is a fact. You were worthy when you took your first breath. You are worthy when you take your last. In between, you are here to learn, to love, to make contact with the world and be shaped by it. A life without mistakes would be a life without touch. So when the next failure arrives, as it will, try this: pause. Feel the sting without building a throne for it. Name what happened plainly. I missed. I broke it. I chose poorly. Then breathe and ask gently, what now? That simple question is a doorway out of shame and into movement. Maybe what now means trying again. Maybe it means resting. Maybe it means letting go of an old dream so you can meet a truer one. Maybe it means forgiving yourself the way you would forgive the child falling as they learn to walk. You are not a finished story. You are a living draft, and drafts are supposed to have crossed out lines. Let failure be your teacher, not your tyrant. Let it keep you honest, not small. Let it remind you that courage is not the absence of fear, but intimacy with fear. The way a sailor knows the wind, not to command it, but to travel with it. And in time, slowly, inevitably, you may come to see that your failures were not detours from your life. They were the texture of it, the places where you met your own limits and discovered they were not borders, but thresholds. So walk on, wobble, fall, rise with dust on your knees and a clearer gaze in your eyes. Life is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be present, and presence, like balance on a rope, is something we learn only by daring to sway.